Good morning. Good morning, calling Commissioners Court to order. It is Wednesday, August the 1st. It is 2018. Our first agenda, our special meeting ran a little bit long. The time is now 10:44, and we're calling this meeting, this workshop meeting of Commissioners Court to order. That's agenda item number 1. Item number 2, review and discuss the current process used to determine job descriptions, job evaluations, slotting of jobs into the current Grimes County salary structure, grade structures, or grade definitions, and continued review of the process. I'm going to ask our Human Resources Director, Ms. Lucy Pope, if you would, to come to the podium and start us off by kind of sharing a little bit of the history of how we started, what's happened, and where we're at today.
Okay, in 2017, we had Judge Lamont was on the seat, and he came up with the idea of creating a grade structure. And Judge Joe Faust decided that he would represent as the coordinator to this job description or job structure. So we came before court. Ben Lamont, before court, asked that we form a committee, and that committee, and he told me exactly who to pick and where to pick them from. And we formed the committee, and we started studying job descriptions. We asked for each department head to send us job descriptions on their employees. And so we formed a committee, and that committee, with the judge, went over each job description. Then as we as a committee put them in the different job categories, we came before Commissioners Court again as a workshop, and we went through each grade structure and explained to the Commissioners Court how those job descriptions were placed in that grade. And in that workshop, the commissioners agreed with us that each job description was put in that grade classification.
Okay. Also, to give support data, tell us about the salary surveys that we conducted.
Okay, our committee did surveys with different counties and, with different comparisons. We didn't just do this overnight. We worked for, Jessica, how many weeks did we work with this?
I know we had probably 6 or 7 long meetings.
Yeah, long weeks that we worked on it, making sure that our job descriptions compared with other counties.
Was it with counties or the market as a whole?
We went with the market and the counties too.
So there's a comparison how we were slotted with other counties, but also since we're competing with the market in the area.
Yes, Ben Lamont was he wanted to market, fair market values on each of these job descriptions too.
Okay. Ms. Herrera, anything else you want to add as part of the committee?
Yes.
Can I get you to come up to the podium?
You want me to leave or you
No,
want?
Y'all are a good looking couple, y'all can stand up.
Thank you, sweetie. We work good together.
Good.
Yes. Personally, I don't feel like I was compared to the market very much the first time that we submitted it to you guys. I think after all the multiple times that department heads came back and the changes that were done, they provided more information and comparisons that they had brought up. And so there was a lot of changes that have been done since, as far as to get it to where the positions are more at market value or comparable to other positions in there. As far as where they're at in the salary range. And so that's improved. I think that the very first one, after all of our meetings that we submitted, the main focus was how everyone was ranked within the definitions. For example, where a position was, what, additional responsibilities put the next position above them. So I think as far as rank wise, it was pretty decent considering the information we had. So errors or things that caused for errors were incomplete job descriptions. If something wasn't like everything, the whole picture, then that would cause us to maybe have someone at a lower definition than they should have been. Another thing is the structure. So there's always changes in office, and so there were some structures where they were, one elected official wanted them all this, at equal rank. However, the new one that came in didn't want it that way, so that they have certain things assigned to each one. That completely changed the definitions. And then as time has passed, there's things that we've noticed or looked into, for example, the bilingual things, and so it's grown and it's changed, and I think all of those changes have been great. As far as the whole process, because you mentioned, or what's on the agenda is, like, how do we go forward? What was approved, or what the Commissioners Court did was they asked Lucy to form a team, not a committee, because you guys didn't, or Commissioners Court didn't appoint individuals to form in this team or in this committee. So we came up with a team, someone from the auditor's office, someone from the treasurer's office, and a couple of people from the major departments, such as the sheriff's office and road and bridge departments, since they have a lot of the employees. And so those were like the main people in the group. What I noticed was they were concerned more, several of the people in the committee were concerned, heavily in their areas. And that's what they had the most knowledge about. And so that caused a little bit of a limitation also. We didn't have a representative from every single department that brought 100% of the information from each department in there. So that's another limitation. But like I said, the Commissioners Court also allowed many opportunities for each department to come back, bring information, and submit that to you guys. And based on the information and salaries and comparable positions, they made decisions to either move them up or down. So I think that the first structure that was submitted was pretty decent considering what we had. But I think as it's grown over these last couple of years, it's all been in a positive direction for the most part. Could we use an expert to come in and review all of our job descriptions and make sure that they're done in their entirety, or give us recommendations on what else to include? I think that would be a great suggestion, because even to this day, I think that there's job descriptions that need improvement. It could be looked at more carefully. So there's still room for growth and improvement, but I think that the product that we have right now is overall a very good product, but it's not, it has to change. In order for it to stay alive and to stay strong and to be something enforceable by policy, it has to change. As far as the committee that was formed back then, it was sunsetted by Commissioners Court. It was, and that one quoting a word, the terminology that was used back then, it was dissolved as far as I knew. So my responsibilities as a team member, as far as I knew, were done. And so I don't think I don't think that having a team or a committee to help with this is a bad thing. But I think that if we form one, it needs to be clear on what their responsibilities are, what their expectations are, and if it's gonna be a committee, that the commissioners carefully appoint them, and that there be something in writing on what the expectations are for this team and what they are to do. Because I've heard a variety of things, for example, comparing them to market values, but there's a whole lot of things that affect salary ranges. For example, where we're located, and there's expertise that we lack, I feel, as employees of the county. Like, my area is accounting, not, salary trends and all of that stuff. So I don't know that we're necessarily qualified for that. So Commissioner Walker's opinion on having an expert come in to help us with that, someone that's an expert in salary trends and changes and job descriptions and making sure that they're full, that might be a good thing. Or you as a Commissioner's Court to take on that duty to go back and review them yourselves and see if there's a format, and maybe require all employees to follow that exact format so that they're all comparable one to another.
But if I remember right, we brought those job descriptions I gave each of the commissioners the job descriptions for every employee in Grimes County, for you as a Commissioner's Court to look at. When we had formed this committee, And when Ben Lamont was here, he suggested that I give those job descriptions to each of the commissioners. So you did have those job descriptions in front of you when we were reviewing, the different categories to put them in.
Well, since it's a space there,
Okay,
I'll say that, yes, you did provide the information. What we learned since you had employees doing the job description, whereas I'm of the opinion that it should have been done by either the elected official or the department head and then submitted.
right. But
Yeah,
as an
'cause-
HR director, I can't tell an elected official.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I can't.
No, I'm saying, I hear what you're saying, but I was going somewhere with
Oh,
that.
okay.
When I said that, so we were relying, in order to have buy-in from the elected official and department head, and for the employees to feel like they've submitted the best job description,
Right.
I don't think that stress, or we tried to stress it as much as possible,
Right.
but it just didn't happen
It didn't
for some of
happen,
them, okay?
yes.
So that's where I see some of the problem is that, some of the job descriptions were not, what they should have been.
Right.
Whether it was us looking at them, or whether that was that elected head official, or
Right.
whether it was the department head. And the other way the information was collected, it wasn't a uniform format for somebody to say, so that all of them looked alike, and then we could break down, okay, well, this is different from this over here, and this is it wasn't a uniform format for the job description, and that might have been part of the issue too. We didn't get a uniform job description, to where, say I have clerical skill, I can circle this, or I can check that, and
Yeah.
and then it'd be slotted.
Ms. Walker, we have Mary Ann Sines come in and do a workshop on how to do job descriptions. And the department heads were in the meeting, and they were told how to do them. You can't tell, you give them examples, you give them the description,
Would
the
you
tool to do it.
Would you identify Mary Ann, please?
Mary Ann Sines Thompson with TAC. She's the health.
TAC is Texas Association of
Texas
Counties.
Association of Counties,
Okay.
correct.
Human resource consultant.
Right, human resource consultant. And she came in and gave a workshop on how to do job descriptions, gave them the tool to use, but they didn't use it. So where do you go from here with that?
Okay, I was just making that
Yeah.
observation.
Yes, right.
Okay.
In my opinion, as far as the job descriptions go, we're not an innovative, brand-new private business. We're a governmental entity. There's a lot of county clerks, there's a lot of district clerks, there's a lot of county auditors. Getting a job description that pretty much matches what we do shouldn't be that hard, because we're all under the same rules, the same laws. There are some tweaks, some differences within counties, because there might be, purchasing may be under this person instead of that person. So there will be some differences, but there's no reason we couldn't piggyback or use job descriptions from neighboring counties that have very similar to us, and use that as a basis, and maybe have Commissioners Court go in, and then you can have what they currently have as a job description, compare it, and make sure we have it all on the uniform. Maybe assign that responsibility to someone to get those done, and don't rely just on all the department heads to do that if they're not responding as you wanted them to. That's the suggestion I would have to get to where we have uniform job descriptions. I don't know.
Well, because I was an outside guy at the time, a citizen working with the team, I remember the question in Commissioner's Court from our county attorney, how do we get them to fill them out completely, or what is the carrot and the stick? And my response to that was, if they do a bad job on the job descriptions and don't incorporate everything that should be on that job description, we're gonna value the position for what the job description says, not what it should say. And if I said it one time to the team,
Right.
I said it multiple times, we're not evaluating the person or describing the person, we're identifying the position. And I know that got me in trouble a couple of times with some people in the county, but that's just a fact. We weren't writing a job description for the person, we're writing a job description for the position. And once we had that, then we would slot that position in the structure and then we do an analysis. Did it fit where we put it? Was it market value? Was it similar to what other counties, or where other counties had slotted their employees?
And to add to that, you mentioned that we go over those. I can't tell you what Mary Ann's people in her office do. That's gonna have to be her job to write that job description. I don't supervise those people. I have no idea. I know they give me my license tags when I go into the headquarters and take my money, but that, you know, I can't tell what she has going on in there. Or, Mr. Walker's people. You know, I don't know, I see those guys working, but I don't know what their positions are within that department. So we can't.
Perform
do
it for
that.
them. No. They would have to maybe sign, like if they could comply, you can give them the form and they can fill it out themselves. But if there's a department that doesn't, or we can't get into compliance, then we maybe can use one that's of a similar position in another county, and they would still have to sign off on it, add to it, take away if they needed to, but at least they would be on the same format. I'm not saying override department heads by any reason.
John Wren was on our committee, and I'd like for him to say a few words, if you don't mind, on how we went through job description.
I've been listening. What Judge Falcus said is absolutely the case. He did repeatedly tell the committee that we were to evaluate the positions and not to evaluate the people that were in them. Jessica rattled off the people that were, or at least some of the people that were on the committee. Blake Jarvis, who was with the sheriff's office at the time, and I were put on it to represent the law enforcement section of it. Ms. Walker asked the question a while ago about the comparison for market value, and I'm not sure if I'm speaking to exactly what you were asking about, but if I heard you correctly, and I may have misunderstood you, I thought you said that we did not do any of that?
Not any of it, but I don't think that it was a strong representation, like, I don't think that we did that very well.
I will speak for the law enforcement portion of it specifically because as
You did.
as she mentioned, because some of us were more specialized in one thing or another, some of us were tasked with different things. Blake Jarvis and I went to a lot of trouble and got job descriptions and salary structures from law enforcement agencies all around us and from across the state that were of similar sizes. I
Yes,
won't argue,
yours
I was gonna say, I
was.
won't argue the point for everybody else, but I will say that there was definitely some of that done in an attempt to put us, in a comparable position to other counties. Y'all are all aware that for the most part, what we found is we're way behind the vast majority of them. And my recollection is the same as Jessica's. You've moved. It's the same as Jessica, that we had multiple meetings, some of them that lasted throughout the bulk of the day. One thing that has been mentioned several times, and I got a phone call about it from someone on the court here in the last few weeks. I sat on the team or committee, whichever verbiage you want to use for it. I was completely unaware, I'm not offended by it, but was completely unaware that it had ever been sunsetted. I was of the belief that if something ever came back up with it, that I would be called back along with some of the original members to help facilitate whatever was going on with it. Not so much for a decision, but for the point of fact that without having somebody from the original committee present to help whoever is making the decision there, you have no history as to how you arrived at something.
And I had no idea that it was resolved. How did you find out?
It was dissolved in court, and I wouldn't be able to tell you guys what date, but it was
I was not
not
aware of
needed
that.
anymore. And I remember Ben Lamont saying, it's not needed anymore, we don't need it anymore.
And now that he's gone and I'm here, my instruction to Lucy for HR was to, as we get requests for reviewing job descriptions, that I wanted Lucy to be in charge of that evaluation team. I preferred Jessica to be a part of the team, to have that continuity from the beginning. And the suggestion was to have 5 people that serve on that team, so if you had a disagreement as to where something might be, you're gonna get, like Commissioner's Court, you get a 3-2 vote, and it would carry on the basis of the input of the team. But the idea was to have you 2 folks for sure as members, and did I recommend?
You recommended for me to select different ones from different departments.
Right.
Vanessa served on it,
Yeah.
Diane LaFleur served on it, Patty served on it.
Right.
We had different ones when we had the team come together.
And the idea was to have some static members, yourself and
Mary Ann,
Jessica,
you did too.
but rotate some of the others, but as that rotation occurs, pull somebody, if it's a road and bridge job, make sure we have somebody from road and bridge. The sheriff's office or DA's, make sure we have somebody out of that. That would be the subject matter expert from that department. And the idea is that we should, if department heads and elected officials are doing their jobs effectively, we should see job revisions on a continuing basis, not 5, 10, 15, or 20, but by 2 or 3. An example is over in 911 environmental, when we had a resignation of an employee, the idea came up and it was approved by Commissioners Court. We're gonna take that, instead of having 2 department heads, we're gonna have 1 department head, let them oversee that area. The court approved that. And as a result, we were able to upgrade some employees. We were able to save $11,000 in salaries and maybe have a little bit better management control over that particular operation. And I would hope that as we continue to move forward, and we see opportunities to combine jobs or to automate positions, we're going to, or there's new technology, that we would continue to have the job evaluation team meet, review the job description, review the position, slot it into our structure, or propose slotting it in the structure, bring it before Commissioners Court, and we approve it and move on.
I would like to say I had a conversation yesterday with Texas Association of Counties, human resource consultant. Our own consultant is out for surgery. I told her that here recently we were seeing a number of issues come before Commissioners Court with the salary grade structure. And she asked me, what is the policy you have for changes? We put out, like you said the other day, it was an immature document, and we started this process of implementing this document. But where are your policies that go along with this document on how maybe your hiring procedures, your promotions, your transfers, your reclassifications, your preparation, maintenance, and appeals to the salary committee? I told her we didn't do any of that. And she said, well, that's where we may need to push the button and push pause, because when you establish this type of document, it needs to have policies and procedures on how it changes in writing. And then people understand how or what the process is. They can go to the policy manual and know this is what we need to do, you know, in order to be heard or seen. The other problem is, I think when I discussed this with her, and I told her about how we pull various members of the team from the staff, not the elected official or not the department head. She cited that as one of the problems. Because from what I've heard from here within our own establishment, it created animosity. You had, instead of looking at it maybe from another perspective of the overall picture, they were looking at it, some people were feeling like, well, they're getting above me, or this, I don't like how this is going, and this person, I'm more valuable than this person. Instead of looking at maybe the job position itself, they're more inserting more themselves, and it kind of created an animosity to where people who thought they were friends are no longer friends. It just created bad morale for our employees. She said that perhaps that if you're gonna have a committee, it should be elected officials who are responsible for that job duty, for that, you know, over the oversight of that department, not the employees themselves making these job descriptions. Because not even at best, when you have department heads and maybe elected officials, you still may have some duties that are inflated, you know, or made to look good, like we've got all this going on and we need this because we need this money over here. So she was concerned that perhaps because we don't have a policy, that's why we're seeing them come in right here at budget time and the different change. We need to establish policy that accompanies that document so that everybody will have an understanding and a buy-in to the process. The problem you find in county government is we have elected officials. We don't have an obligation, or we can only try to get that elected official on board to follow this procedure. I pulled one from Jefferson County, and it talked in here about elected officials are encouraged to comply with these guidelines. However, their participation is voluntary within the limits of the official budget. Now, what we found when we got the evaluations, we were very concerned about what we received for the evaluations and how serious did everyone take the evaluations, because some departments got all 10 and we wonder, is everybody in that department perfect? I mean, is there not room for improvement anywhere? Not saying that there aren't 10s, but we can all grow, including myself. We can all grow and, still evolve. But that's the problem with government. We have elected officials, that we as a court, we oversee the budget. And it's very hard I don't think we have a complete buy-in of everybody from what we saw. And maybe Commissioner Cox can speak to that, it just concerned us.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. I think it's a twofold process. I think you have two issues going on here. I think one is the classification of the grade structure and the hourly pay rate. And I think that can be done by a committee. I think the second process by which a person is requested to be moved from one grade level to another is a totally different process. And I'm not so sure, but I don't think when you're discussing personnel matters that should be done in the form of an employee. And what I mean by that is the same type of committee sitting down listening to personnel issues related to one particular employee. I think if it's going to be within the jurisdiction or purview of the Commissioner's Court to make that decision should be made in closed meeting with the Commissioner's Court, probably the elected official, department head, and the employee, and there could potentially be some type of interview process going on there, because ultimately what that is doing is either a demotion or a promotion. And I don't think that everybody in the county should be sitting on that particular committee to determine the fate of that one employee. That's just my take on it.
I'm not sure I followed that, Commissioner.
Well, if you come in here and you ask me to put together a committee to determine whether or not somebody should be promoted, is it that committee's responsibility to determine if that employee is to be promoted? And you're discussing all types of personnel issues in that committee meeting that may not be beneficial discussions to that committee.
Well, I guess if I'm following what you're saying, I don't see the committee talking personnel issues. I mean, what they're doing is they're talking about job requirements, and you're right, somebody that's in that job, we're either looking at leaving them where they're at, taking it to a lower grade, or bringing it up to a higher grade.
Okay, well then maybe I have a misunderstanding on the process, and that may be where we need to go with this discussion, because it's my understanding that if somebody wants to be promoted from one grade level to the next, they have to be subjected to the committee's decision in order to proceed to the Commissioner's Court to make that request. Is that not how the process is?
Well, the individual doesn't come in and say, hey, I think I ought to be a 5 and you've got me in a 4. That would come from a department head or an elected official saying, you got this job in a 4, and I think it needs to be a 5. At that point, Lucy would say, on what grounds? Well, we've added this and this and this, or when we put the initial description together, we didn't include this and this, and I see where it's left off, so now we're incorporating it into that position. At that point, Lucy would call the job evaluation team together, or when she has 2 or 3 of these requests, review, okay, there is merit, put that in the job description. Based on the information we have, that job is still slotted as a 4, it should not go to a 5, and that would really be the end of the discussion. If it was the advice of the committee that it would go from a 4 to a 5 because of changes in it, then that would then have to go before Commissioners Court, as we've been doing the process so far, and agree, yeah, that goes to 5.
Okay, but I don't think that's how it's working. That's not the information that I've got.
How do you feel it's working?
That if somebody wants to make a grade change, they're supposed to go before the committee, and the committee's supposed to bless that to come to the Commissioners Court and request it.
They have to go to HR. They're supposed to go to HR, but that's like Ms. Walker said, it's not in a policy written out. You approach, department head is to approach HR. HR looks at the issue, and if it needs a committee to look at it or the team to look at it, then that's scheduled. Like this time she scheduled, I think it was like 6 different departments.
On
She
June
collected
6th.
them, and then on June 6th, it was the scheduled date for all of them to meet and discuss the issues. Some of them were kind of dismissed, some of them required more research, and some of them have already been brought before court and have been changed.
With that being said, I did ask Ms. Lucy what departments have come before you and asked for, changes. And it concerned me that maybe some of the departments that came before you might have, should have come to Commissioner's Court, because some of them we had no idea they had went before you. And it concerns me, who are they going before, which is what he's basically saying. Is it you as a staff member, not a department head or elected head, hearing Ms. Waters' request to have her employee moved somewhere else, rather than elected officials or department heads making that decision along with HR? It's putting you in a bad position.
Well,
That's correct.
And
That's what we pay her for, though.
I don't think she
mean,
may
that's
not
her-
want that job responsibility.
I mean, I'm not trying to be
Not be paid
funny.
enough.
That's what her job should be as an HR director.
Not Miss Lucy, I'm
No.
not talking about.
Oh, okay.
She's talking to.
I'm talking about Jessica
Jessica,
as a staff member of a department head.
Yeah.
But I was going on to say that some of these requests, and we have such a small HR department,
Right.
some of them might have, should have come before Commissioner's Court.
Well, we did have 2 come before me, a team.
Maybe all of them.
Well-
Let me rephrase that.
We had 5, Road and Bridge, and we had 2 more, myself and another department came. After we discussed raising the cap, both of us decided that maybe after raising the cap, then that gives us room that if a raise is given to our employees, that we would stay where we're, the grade level that we're at, and that gives that opportunity for that employee to get a raise. The other 3 came before y'all.
So, once again, to me, we're hearing 2 things intermingle.
Okay.
We're talking about a job description, but yet what we're hearing on this end is people are changing grades in order to get raises.
This is what it's all about. I'm sorry. The whole
frank.
grade definition, every employee can vouch for me. It's about money. It is about money. It's not about the job description. It's about where I'm placed so I can get a raise. If you really, really consider this grade definition, every employee that looks at it, what grade am I at so that I can get a raise?
And that's what we keep hearing.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
you do hear that.
So therefore, I don't
That-
know,
That's why it's important not to look at the people.
Right.
It's
Well,
important to
that's
look
why
at
we
the
don't-
position.
Yes, Judge, but that goes back to what I'm saying, is that there's people in the county, employees of the county, that believe that their raises or their pay is dependent on what a committee says.
Well, and that's true.
And so that's where we probably need to define the process by which,
Well, let me just.
in my mind.
Let's say I'm a road and bridge guy and I'm doing a 5 job, and by golly, I think it's a 6 job, then I'm gonna take it to either Patrick or Sam or one of the foremen and say, hey, boss, you need to go talk to them. I'm killing myself and, you know, I'm at the top of my 5 grade and I'm not gonna get an increase. Well, let me go take it to the boss. So we take it to Harry Walker, and Harry Walker says, no, that job's where it needs to be and that's gonna be it. Or Harry Walker says, well, let me send it over to HR and let them review it. And then if the job evaluation team goes, oh, they've made some structural changes to the job by definition, and in comparison to what we see with others, we'll move it up. Or no, we've got it properly placed, that's where it's going to be. I mean, that should be the process.
I agree, but it might be beneficial to have that in
Harry,
writing
did
somewhere.
Okay.
that not happen? Would you come up and explain the changes you made because of the job description?
Yeah, I was gonna make some comments anyway, but,
They putting you in the hot seat.
I wasn't here through most of the formation of the salary structure. I was fortunate enough to get in on the tail end of it, right before everything got adopted, so I'm a little bit familiar with it. And I appreciate the work that everybody went through to develop that. I think we have to recognize this is a new structure. There's gonna be some growing pains, there's gonna be some adjustments that need to be made. I think it's important, as Commissioner Walker said, I think some policies need to be established, how to work within that structure, that the process for getting changes made should be consistent, and we're seeing that's not necessarily the case. Like, in the case of Road and Bridge, we proposed some changes, we went to the salary committee, they considered it and recommended it be forwarded to Commissioners Court, which we did, and then y'all approved that. And my understanding is that hasn't been the same process in every case. So I think that's an issue. The other issue that I'm concerned about is there are some inherent problems with the salary committee being comprised of county employees. Because we have seen it creates personal animosities. My representative for Road and Bridge resigned from the committee because she felt like it was becoming too personal, and there were people that are still not talking to her because she spoke her mind and made what she felt like were her honest assessments of some of the proposed changes. And that's bad, because these people have to work together every day. I think we need to think about the structure of the committee. I think either an outside group or limit it to elected officials and department heads, where maybe you can prevent some of that from going on, because that's definitely negative. And it's, you know, again, this is the second year that we've operated under this. There are gonna be changes. There, you know, some people put more effort into their descriptions, others didn't. You know, getting it all balanced out and smooth is gonna take some time. And you're gonna have more of these things for a while till things get polished up a little bit. So I think I would recommend that change also. The other benefit to that is that if you have people who are not even familiar with the individuals affected by the changes, they can focus on the job description, what does that position require, without getting caught up in the personalities. And I think that's just human nature. You tend to go there when you know who's being affected. So I think that's a consideration I would recommend to you. And then the other thing I would suggest, well, a couple things. When it comes to doing grade changes and adjusting the positions, I think the committee approach, where you have the department head or the elected official come in and present that is a good process. When it comes to actual salary decisions, I think that needs to be brought forward by the department head, not through the committee, but to the court, as a part of the budget process. Because I probably, you can't take the evaluations that I do and evaluations that Lucy or Mary or whoever does and compare them, because last year, you know, when I did my evaluations, I sent Judge Lamont a note with it and said, I don't give 8s and 9s. I expect excellence from my people. So if I give them a 7 or 8 that says they're, or a 6 or 7 that says they're doing satisfactory, that means they're doing an excellent job, but that's what I expect. I've seen other evaluations where everybody got 9s and 10s. They're not consistent, so I don't think you can compare them. I think you have to look at the recommendations of each department head, each elected official for their employees, and that's always gonna be very difficult to compare against a different department. I think, as Commissioner Phillips said, that's a separate process. The committee should be focused on the structure and make sure that the structure and the policies being used are consistent and appropriate, and evaluations done separately. The other thing I think that we ought to think about, and this may be a committee exercise, because we're seeing people requesting grade changes to get raises for their people. One of the things we ought to look at is using more of certificate pay. The Sheriff's Department's got a well-organized structure for certificate pay, but most of the other departments don't. So if I've got somebody who has a certain position, but say he's just at a light equipment operator, but he's got a CDL license, that's not his job. He's not required to have that CDL, but it's a benefit to the county for him to have that. If I could give him a certificate pay that says, okay, that license is worth your grade base pay plus $1 or 75 cents or whatever an hour on top, rather than having to change his grade. So I think we should maybe think about some of those kind of things. I don't envy you. This is a very difficult, very complex subject. There's gonna be, a lot of people gonna get their toes stepped on across the board. But I think to the extent we can take the personalities out of it, establish clear policies, and just recognize we're gonna have to, it's gonna have to evolve. It's gonna change. The descriptions need to be polished up. And then over time, it'll get, you know, more and more functional.
You said something that the human resource consultant mentioned yesterday. She said many counties across the state of Texas, it's very hard, they found it very hard to do grade structures and merit raises. And that many times they won't even go into a county when they're trying to set this up so that they're not frowned upon. But a lot of the counties do something what they call grade and step plan. And in those grades, like you're saying, you're calling certificate pay, there are steps that, you know, and that because of your tenacity to go out and get a degree and do better, that you move to another step, and in that step you may receive a 1% increase or something like that. But it's steps, within grades, you know. And a lot of counties use a grade and step plan rather versus the salary structure. The salary structure is still there, but there is room for improvement within each one of those grades, and it's rewarded for people who want to take the initiative to wanna, say I wanna become a CPA while I'm an auditor, you know. There's some merit to Grimes County for that person taking that. And many times we keep talking about the person or the job description. But then you have people who are excelling, and it's very hard for counties to implement a merit system, because what we found in the past when we first did the merit system, you might have one employee get everything that was allocated to that department, and the other people therein get nothing.
What's
you
wrong with
know?
that though? If you
Well-
got the one person that's excelling,
You might have other
everybody
people excelling that were never ever recognized, and this is my friend, and I'm gonna make sure they get an increase in their salary.
but if that's the,
So there
if
should
that's
be
the elected
some-
official, that's their right to do that.
But it's a possibility. My question to her was, within a merit system, can you have caps on what one employee receives?
Sure.
You know, so we don't have that, you know, so if we're given merit, how can we ensure that merit isn't given to one person but distributed amongst the ones that deserve it? Not just willy-nilly, but amongst the ones that deserve it, to where one person is not receiving it. She said that there should be caps in there,
Sure.
but it's very difficult, you know, to implement when you're dealing with
It's gonna be
county
subjective.
and
You put
elected
You get
officials.
5% cap on there, you put a 3% cap on there, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be subjective.
But it also ensures that that one person is not the only person that receives something.
But Commissioner, I don't agree that every employee should receive something.
I didn't say every,
Well,
I say those that merit it.
then that,
I could have 2 or 3 people in my department that did some great things, went out above and beyond. And because she's my friend and we've been talking, I'm gonna make sure that she gets a bonus or an increase. And maybe I don't give anybody else anything. There should be something in place that ensures that if you have other people, you asked the question one time, if we gave the merit, how can we ensure that the people that are deserving get a portion of that merit? And if we find that elected official is not doing that, maybe then we should look at that budget again and say, maybe this doesn't merit, maybe the elected official doesn't merit in the department. You understand? Because you're not giving it to the people who have worked hard to go out and have worked hard to be rewarded. You know, it should be some kind of cap on there to where everything doesn't go to one person, because we've seen that happen.
And I think, you know, what you're discussing goes back to the idea of having policies or having guidelines of how you apply this system. You know, I know as a department head, if I distribute merit raises in a highly unbalanced fashion, I'm gonna get blowback from my employees.
absolutely.
If they see somebody's being unfairly compensated, particularly for just, you know, because they're my friend or whatever, not that I have friends, but,
They'll sink you.
but, you know, there's that check on the system, that I have to justify what I do as department head, not only to y'all, but also to my staff. And if I'm not fair, if people don't look at it and say, yeah, I agree, you know, he's doing a really good job, he deserved it, you know, but, you know, why did this one get a raise? And, you know, it's always gonna be a problem, but there are some natural checks on the system, but whether you call them, I fully recognize the difficulty y'all have in trying to constrain the actions of other elected officials. I don't envy you that chore either, because they basically say, I'm gonna do what I want, but they have to answer to their staff for what they do. And to some degree, they have to answer to the public, you know. So it's always gonna be difficult when you call them a policy that's, you know, rigid, or just like, it says, you know, you shouldn't give more than X% of of your merit money in any one individual, you know, something along that lines. But I think some guidance would definitely be, helpful to those of us who are trying to come up with recommendations for merit pay. The merit pay system is always difficult. You know, it's real easy to say we're gonna do across the board and everybody moves up the same, and the inequities that are there just get perpetuated. Everything that's responsive to what's really going on is more difficult than the easy answers. So again, it's, all the work that's gone into this structure, I think has been very beneficial to the county. We have seen, you know, a dramatic reduction in the turnover we had in Road and Bridge since this system was implemented, and the salary changes that went along with it. I think that's all been beneficial. You know, the year before I started, they had 6 or 7 employees in Road and Bridge that left to go take other jobs elsewhere. I think this last year after it was implemented, we only had 1, and he turned around and came back after a month. So I think it's had the intended purpose, maybe not in every department, but at least within my department where I'm familiar with it. But I think it's still, you know, it's in its infancy. There's still some fine tuning that needs to be done. It's gonna take some more hard work.
I'm sorry, they also, while he's on that subject, they also had in their policy a progression through salary range. And it had a sample of salary progression chart, you know, what percentage, you know, if you're, you know, you move through the range, you know, whether after entry level, I may get hired at an entry level minimum of experience, and then after 90 days, you know, I move up, you know, to a little bit more. Then maybe after a year and I progress well and I've excelled and move up a little bit more. You know, it's a progression chart that's built in. But once again, we go back to, we need policy to accompany the document we have.
I think it's important that the employees can see within the grade structure that they have an opportunity to
Yes.
move up, through their efforts, that they can get ahead within the structure. They're not gonna be pigeonholed. My son is a teacher, and I've talked to him, and he says, I can tell you for the next 40 years what my salary's gonna be, because the state issues a step-by-step structure, and I'm gonna get this much of a raise every year as long as I, you know, behave well.
Follow the plan.
You know, that's not encouraging people to excel. That's, I do my time and I move up in salary. That's not beneficial in my opinion. But I think some guidelines, I think some latitude within the system to recognize whether you call them, you know, step adjustments or certificate pay or combination, I think will help make the system function more the way it was intended.
Thank you, I appreciate that
I
feedback.
think one of the things that we might want to investigate and draw wisdom from the school district and other governmental agencies, our sheriff's department in particular seems to be doing it. And he references it as a certificate pay, but in reality, what it is a stipend. So if you have an employee that has ambition to go out and get extra things and do extra work to benefit the county, that they are provided some type of, I guess you would say, incentive pay or stipend to do that without having to go in and change their entire salary range through a grade change, for instance, because sometimes, in a lot of cases, their job duties don't change, they've just accentuated their professional standing. And that may be an avenue that we might want to look at in the future.
I don't disagree with that, but I will raise the question, if the employee goes out and gets accreditation for this or this particular certificate or that particular certificate, you said to benefit the county. So if it benefits the county, I wouldn't have a problem with some type of a stipend on there. But if they get this certificate, they get this qualification, they get this license, they get so-and-so, I see no reason to pay them for that if the county's not going to use that, or if it's not to the benefit of the
Well,
county.
You know, certainly it would have to be job-related type
Well,
stuff.
but you could have, let's go to the auditor's office, we've mentioned CPA, go to the treasurer's office, let's go, you know, we've mentioned, you have somebody that has a CPA, that's great. And that gives a lot of credibility to that individual, because that's a tough road to go these days. But if we as a county are not gonna use that skill, why should our citizens pay for that?
Well, I would argue that they would use that skill.
To give you an example of what he's talking about,
Well, before, and I'll let, if you will,
Okay.
but say you have a grade 5 person in treasury, and I don't know if we have a grade 5 person in treasury, but, clerical responsibilities. They wanted to leave the corporate world, they wanted to come to the county, it's closer to home, they like the 15 holidays a year, what have you, and they've got a CPA. They might have that skill, Commissioner, and they may rely on that, but that's a grade 5 position, and for us to pay a 7 because they're a CPA or an 8 because they have a CPA, I don't think that's fair to our taxpayers. That's just my
I
opinion.
don't
Well,
think
then
he
we're
was
going-
talking
we're going
about
back to market
grade.
value then.
Sir,
We revert back to market value at that point.
but the market value of the job is a grade 5, and that's what we're paying. It's not a 7 or it's not an 8. Now, if we say, you know, because that person's also involved on the investment committee, or, you know, we raise the qualifications and we need somebody with a CPA, then by all means, we pay for it. Commissioner?
to give you an example of that, Harry referred to education. As a teacher, I taught for about 6 years with administration certification. I didn't get paid for that until I took a principal position, because then I had the responsibility of that. And we need the same thing in our pay scale. When you take on more responsibility, you get more pay. And we talked about that several times as we developed this along the way.
Well, I'm gonna throw this out there.
Throw it.
I'm coming with it.
Okay.
Okay, give me a moment.
You're in the wind up right now.
Then why? Okay, some of this, we're having this discussion because of the auditor and different departments, but we had this discussion about last week about the auditor moving from the grade 7 to the professional 1. Once again, we were talking about the position and not the person. We said we would revisit this matter, and it's back on here again about moving the assistant auditor to professional 1 and classification. But I heard you make the argument last week that maybe they should be moved to the professional 1 because of the degrees that they have. So I'm hearing two different things, and all we're trying to get to is if we value what they bring to that job description or that position, how can we let them know that we value that? Not saying that we can pay for a CPA to be in that position, but if they had to go out and hire somebody, if they hired somebody off the street with 2 years minimum experience, it's gonna take some time to bring them up to the speed to where the people who are in that office now on the job that they're doing. So I heard you say, or the word preferred has been mentioned, you know. On some of them, we're gonna have to decide either this is required or this is preferred, you know.
Mhm.
So it's really difficult when you're trying to make sure that if they bring value to the county by having these degrees, how can they be compensated?
And you suggested a way, that maybe there's a stipend or there's a certificate pay,
Which is what he made the suggestion.
okay?
The other thing I want to say is this is a very intricate matter that we're dealing with. I would make the suggestion that in creating a policy to go along with this document, why not go to, we have Texas A&M University, Prairie View A&M University, Sam Houston State University, Blinn College. Go to the School of Businesses and see if they have intern students who would work with us to perfect our job descriptions. You know, somebody that doesn't have anything to gain from working within the system here. Help us to perfect our job descriptions so that we're not constantly changing them, and maybe bring some insight on how we can incorporate certificate pay or step and grade level changes. You know, how do we do that, and how we come up with this policy, and how do we word it? You know, we need, there's more work to be done, as we've all, you know, determined. That there's work to be done. There needs to be something in writing, so when somebody wants to come before the committee, or wants to come, a department head or elected official feels like that person needs to be reviewed, a review process in writing. And then that would eliminate a lot of the stuff that we're now facing, because we have a document over here, but we don't know how to proceed with it, with some of the changes we're trying to make. School is about to take in. It would not hurt to reach out to those universities and see if they have a senior member who has to do a project, would take us on as, you know, we would take them on as an intern to help us in turn try to perfect the document.
I think it would be beneficial to have some, at least some guidelines in place in writing so that we can refer to them. Even, I mean, I may not fully understand the whole process at this point on how things operate, and I know I've heard some concerns from other people, employees and department heads throughout the county that question, not necessarily in its entirety, but to some level, how the process works. So I mean, there may be a need for some clarification with that regard. I think the instrument itself is, you can use the instrument. We've just heard from Mr. Walker that it's a beneficial instrument. It's just how are we implementing that? And I think that's kind of the question at hand, the processes by which we utilize this instrument to make decisions.
I think John had a comment. John?
I just wanted to offer, I made this comment to Commissioner Walker and to the judge yesterday, but I just wanted to throw this out there as a suggestion. I personally totally agree with having a policy, a written policy for how department heads or the elected officials come to committee or come to commissioner's court, whoever y'all choose, to challenge changing a position from one grade level to the other. I would like to suggest that if you write such a policy, that you consider including in it that the procedure to go through and do this be either a once a year or a twice a year type event. Something outside the budget process, so that when the budget is submitted to y'all, the request from the various departments in May or June, that this issue is decided for that year, so that this court is not tied up dealing with this year after year after year in the middle of the budget process. I think that is terribly unfair to y'all to be bogged down with this, and I don't think it's necessary. I think you could put a mechanism in your policy to say if you have some unexpected department head or elected official change, that person could come to this court and petition outside the normal date to do that. But in general, I don't see why all of us could not come to y'all in February or March each year before the budget process, be heard if we want to challenge or change something, and then get a decision so that y'all can move on to the budget process. I don't think it should just be you wake up one day and decide that today's the day I'm gonna do this, and this court continually be tied up with this. And that's just my suggestion for what it's worth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Well-
thoughts or comments?
I just want to say, really appreciate everybody that's tried to help us implement this procedure. All the ones that worked really hard to get it done, including you, Judge. And that we know that there's still work to be done, but be encouraged as elected officials or department head, or even our staff, that we are trying to work out the issues to where everybody has buy-in to and understands the process and knows the structure. Because I hear so many times, I don't even know what grade I'm in, I don't even know, you know. And not only do those department heads hear it, like you say, and elected officials hear it, we hear it too. So I just think there's more work to be done, you know, so that we can move forward with it or decide what we're going to do and move forward.
And Judge, if it helps you out, I mean, I don't mind volunteering to assist with coming up with some type of policy for that, in addition to.
I think we can also put the task on our HR director, Lucy Pope. She can coordinate also with TAC, who has connection, and if you want to head that up, Commissioner, to get some input from them on policies from other counties, because I'm sure all counties don't have a policy, i.e. Grimes County doesn't, but what is their practice, what is their procedure, so that they have something. I'm hesitant to have more written documentation that tells us what we're going to do, because I just enjoy reading the code as it is and personnel manuals. No, I get it, but if it helps add clarity, because the members of the court do change, the elected officials do change, and so we don't have to have this discussion every change. They can just go to the book and say, okay, well, I understand this is the process that's in place. It adds to ease of operation.
Yes.
And I'm all about adding to ease of operation, not complicating the process. The one thing that I'm very disappointed in hearing from Mr. Walker is that some employees in the county don't talk to one of your employees because they serve on that committee. I think that is terribly immature of those individuals, and I'm sorry that Patty is having to endure that. My comment to that was along the lines, they were friends and now they're not friends. My thought would be they weren't much of a friend to begin with, if that's their attitude towards Patty. Just, you know, and I know the older I get, the tougher my skin gets, but that's, you know, oh well. I'm really saddened to hear that between county employees within the county. So, Ms. Pope, if you will coordinate with Commissioner Cox, and thank you for volunteering, is that acceptable to you, Commissioner Walker?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So do some research, possibly even put a proposed policy together or written procedure of how it needs to be done.
And maybe
then-
reach out to those universities like suggested, and or hiring specialists, you know, or HR specialists, you know, to help you with it.
Well, I was the HR specialist, but y'all didn't pay me or hire me. I just did.
Well, then why didn't we have this policy procedure to go along with it?
That was not a part of the project, but I would have been glad to make that part of the project for another $5,000 or $6,000. I just, you know, when we have the talent in-house, I don't want to pay for outside.
Well, let me say this, HR consultants at TAC did warn about getting a professional. She thought the intern was a great idea because many times counties would spend money on a professional and not get the document that they
That's
were
right,
after
right.
in the first place. So, you know,
That'd be great.
Anything we come up with, I'm sure we'll staff with the illustrious county attorney before we bring it.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, please leave me out of this.
I think there's no need for further discussion on agenda item number 2. Let's move to, with the court's permission, agenda item number 3, discuss and review moving assistant auditors to professional 1 or other appropriate classification. Ms. Pope, I'm gonna turn it back over to you as our HR director. Do you have a recommendation?
They came before the team and we reviewed their.
Could I get you to come to the podium, to the microphone, please?
The auditor did come and presented, job descriptions to us regarding moving them from a grade 7 to a grade, at first to a grade 10. And then after further discussions, the committee, they wanted to be presented to the Commissioners Court as being moved to professional 1, and that's when we brought the, before the Commissioners Court to be reviewed on what position, or what grade level we should move them to.
Okay, and it says professional 1 or other appropriate classification.
Right.
Has it been determined there may be another appropriate classification? or
Well,
is professional
I did
1?
get with TAC and with Mary Ann Sines, and Judge, you were involved in that telephone conversation.
It was?
And she did some researching, and she felt like either a grade 9 or a 10 would be more appropriate to put them in. She went to different counties, she spoke to another a human resource specialist at TAC, and she suggested a 9 or a 10. But that is up, she left it up to the courts. She did say that as a court, you should get with the auditor and ask if they have a degree, do they need to have that degree or required or not required?
So is it part of their job description,
Job
job
description,
requirement?
right.
Okay. And what was the
Preferred or what was the word? Preferred or, there's another word, I can't remember.
Required.
Required, right. Preferred or required. Now, I know when they first came to us with their job descriptions, on their job descriptions, it did not say that a degree was required. And then they've come back and said that it is required.
required or preferred?
Required, is that required?
Okay.
Required.
And I'll just play devil's advocate here. Why is that a requirement now?
Let me have the auditors or Jessica.
Sure. I mean, I think y'all can appropriately speak to it.
Education was not included at all on the previous ones, and so now it has it. Just from experience, I've been here over 10 years. The salary in those offices was very low. They couldn't afford to have somebody come in with that minimum requirement. Right now, the reason that our office is requesting this change for 3 other positions, if you look through the job descriptions, you're telling us, or the document is telling us that we're grossly overpaid. So we've provided backup or descriptions with other county auditors' offices. We are competitively paid. We're well paid for what we do. We're not grossly overpaid. And so the document needs to reflect where we should be or where we are. The grade 7 position where we're at in the salary range that it's in, and putting us there is funding what we currently make. It's not, it's telling us that we're grossly overpaid, which is not the case after you look at the comparison with other county auditors. The requiring this is not something that we just pulled out of the blue. Like, it's what other county auditors require of their assistants, that do the job that those 3 positions do. So that's why you have them in front of you.
So if say you win the lotto tonight, you give Mary Nichols your notice that you're not coming back tomorrow, so we need to hire your replacement. Mary Nichols, are you going to hire someone that has an accounting degree or the necessary education level
Yes,
for that position?
yes. I could not afford to have somebody come in that is not familiar even with county government to take her position. I would have to hire at least 2 people to take that place.
Can you afford to pay someone to replace her that would have that county government experience along with the accounting experience at the level that we're currently paying?
Well, when they were placed in the 7, it was because we didn't include what qualifications were needed.
Okay,
And when they were put in that classification of 7, it was because no qualifications were put in there. And they were, some of them were already above the maximum range.
Okay.
So, you know, that immediately put most of them in a red line. And
Meaning they can't receive any more money because they're at the top of the range. Okay?
Okay, and so when we were looking at that and knew that, you know, that really wasn't the place that they needed to be, we started looking at other job descriptions and realized, oh, we didn't put any
Education,
education
okay.
requirements or experience requirements. And that, I mean, my office is working above and beyond what they should be doing, because we don't have space for another employee. It would be wonderful if we had one more auditor, but I have not even requested that from the district judges because I don't have a place to put them.
Well, then we're gonna
But it
keep
would-
you where you're at.
Huh?
Then we're gonna keep you where you're at, so we don't have to deal with that issue.
Well, I would eventually have to. But, as the county continues to grow and as the revenue gets bigger and the more grants we have, I'm gonna have to expand the office. And when that happens, I'm gonna need somebody that has the experience and or the education.
Okay. All right.
To answer your question, yes, as I mentioned earlier, the salary that are in place right now for those positions, they're competitive with job descriptions that require that as a minimum. And so I would say yes, she can afford to hire someone in with requiring that as a minimum for any of those 3 positions.
And the district judges do have the say-so as to what the merit increases are going to be, or salaries are ultimately going to be, but they do go along with
The salary.
the salary structure of what we have incorporated, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And also, when I request a percentage increase for my employees, I show the district judges which position is gonna get how much. I don't give 5% across the board.
Okay.
I go by their evaluations and the work that they put out. And so when I'm preparing what I'm requesting from the district judges, I go over my evaluations again. And then I show them how much I wanna pay each position. And they either approve it or disapprove it.
But ultimately, the decision lies on the district judge's decision, not on commissioner's court decision.
Correct.
Okay. But they do try to live within our means and our structure.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you both.
I have a question. If you add the education requirement to the position and you lose an employee and you can't find someone with the experience or the education to take that position, how are you gonna fill that position?
I'm reasonably sure with, the population in Bryan College Station and also, Montgomery, that I would get somebody with those qualifications.
At the rate of pay we're paying?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, the answer to the question lies in the local government code. What we're talking about today is specifically addressed in the local government code. And it talks about assistance to the auditor. And what it says is, from time to time, the county auditor may certify to the district judges a list stating the number of assistants to be appointed, the name, duties, qualifications, and experience of each appointee, and the salary to be paid each appointee. The district judges, after careful consideration of the application for the appointment of the assistants and after inquiry concerning the appointee's qualifications, the positions sought to be filled, and the reasonableness of the requested salaries, shall prepare a list of the appointees that the judges approve and the salary to be paid to each. The judges shall certify this list to the Commissioners Court, which shall order the salaries to be paid on the performance of services and shall appropriate an adequate amount of money for this purpose. So the discussion that we're having is very simple. It's what are the district judges, what qualifications they want, and how much do they want us to pay them? That's the bottom line.
So have the district judges approved the revision in the job descriptions?
I have not presented them to them, no.
Okay.
So we don't have any control over that.
But we didn't present to them the job descriptions before.
Well,
It doesn't state
I-
the job descriptions, it states he is presented with our
Qualifications?
salaries.
Qualifications, what is that?
And that we discussed in a meeting with him, and those are approved, and there is an order that's done and followed with the Commissioner's Court. With the District Clerk's Office on an annual basis. And that brings me back to my point. The salaries that we currently have were approved individually, person by person, were approved by the district judges. The salaries we have been reviewed by them, and they think that they are good, and we're not overpaid. However, that document, or where we are on the schedule, it shows that we're grossly overpaid.
Have they approved the proposed change to the qualifications?
We did not even present them with the previous job description before it came to the salary structure committee.
But that's a
But-
question that they have to answer. It's not up to the Commissioners Court. That's solely, and I'm not here to step on their toes, or step on your toes, or even step on over their authority. That is solely within their discretion. If they don't want anybody with a college degree, you don't get people. If they do, then you do, but
Right.
that's not for us
And
to
I'll
determine.
gladly email them
That,
this.
that would be the suggestion to have, give clarity to our discussion. Put it before the district judges. If they agree with your recommendation of making those educational levels or the equivalent of that as part of the job description, that solves that problem. Then back to what Jessica is bringing to our attention, if we leave based on where the district judges have them paid, what level, then they are in the wrong category within our current structure. And the question for us could appropriately be, do we move them to a professional 1, or do we move them to a 9 or a 10, providing their salaries fit into that category? So I would think, Commissioner.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. The only exception that I would have is that professional 1 is set out on the salary structure as a position that has to have a college degree and has to have a certification. I think it undermines the whole salary structure if you try to put people that in that category that don't necessarily belong. If we need to create another category based on what information we get from the district judges, we can certainly do that. But there may come a time where we actually have more employees that fit into that professional 1 category.
Okay.
So I think we protect that,
Okay.
so to speak.
But the 9 or 10 would satisfy our current issue, is that not correct?
I believe so.
The 10 would definitely do it.
So I understand your point, and makes perfectly good sense.
Actually, if I understand it correctly, you all came to the committee requesting a grade 10
Correct,
and suggested the salary range
yes.
and brought documentation to back it up. But once it was discussed with the salary committee, then they suggested moving it to a professional.
Yes, because the ranges for other comparable positions were much higher than where a 10 maxes out.
But originally your suggestion was a 10.
Yes, because we brought it before as professional 1 and it was declined. And so we didn't want to go down that route again.
Which you are
wait a minute.
professional, by the way, and do a very good job.
Okay, say that again. I didn't quite understand what you said.
We didn't think it would be approved as professional 1, us in the auditor's office. So we submitted it at that grade level. All the current salaries fit within it, currently, we wouldn't, it wouldn't show or look like we were grossly underpaid, overpaid, excuse me, in grade 10. And so that's, we at least would fit, as far as our salary.
So you're saying the first time you went to salary committee, you went with a professional one?
The salary
No.
committee, originally, 2.5 years ago, when it was first getting started,
Uh-huh.
it wasn't put into a grade level, it was put into like a professional one, or like a pre-professional, sort of like, I don't remember the terminology. It was put into a different category, but then there's that, required degree. And at that moment, whenever it was brought before court, it was questioned, is it required? Well, it's not on paper. It wasn't on paper at that time. We didn't have an official job description that included, that education requirement. And so the answer was no, and so it wasn't considered to be moved into it.
Another thing that some other counties have done is they have removed the auditor's office from the salary structure because the district judges are over that office.
I did ask that question yesterday. If the district judges were over that office, do you fit into the salary structure? The answer from that professional was the auditor doesn't fit into the structure, but the staff does. And that was that professional, you know. But I think the suggestion that he makes is a valid one, that you present it to the district judge and then let us hear some feedback from him, you know.
And y'all's meeting is scheduled for August 21? 21st, so y'all have time to do that, to incorporate into your meeting, so once we get their recommendation, might be a moot point,
Yeah, I think so.
okay? Any further discussion on agenda item number 3? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I seconded.
There's a motion before the court from Commissioner Dobianski and a second from Commissioner Walker to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, do we need